Hey everyone. Welcome to Navigating Parent Communication. Today we're going to be talking about just some tips and easy, helpful ways to navigate what can often be challenging for educators is the parent communication piece. And we'll talk about, kind of general parent communication as well as navigating even those more challenging communications that we sometimes have to do. So, for sure, a lot of us as educators feel like parent communication can be one of the most difficult aspects of being a teacher. A lot of times we'll say things like, the easy part is the kids, it's the teachers it's the parents that make things difficult. And that's because sometimes just that communication can be really challenging. A couple problems that we run into when we're looking at effective communication with parents, specifically in the preschool setting, is that all parents are different and their communication styles may be different than yours. And this is one of the things that I have found really challenging and at the same time really rewarding is kind of figuring out how to navigate those different parenting and communication styles. So, for example, I may like to be more direct, and a parent may have a different kind of communication style. Maybe you have a parent who gets very emotional when they communicate, or maybe you have a parent who prefers to have everything very brief and quick, or maybe, you have parents who only want it through email, or parents who only want to talk in person. So there's all different kinds of communication styles, and when you have, 8, 9, 10, 12, 15, 25 kids in your class, then that means that you are having to navigate many different styles for many different parents. So that is hard. It's one of those skills that takes some time to get, kind of get your muscles ready for. Um, the other problem is that you may have to communicate information that they don't agree with or are not ready to hear. And this is really, really relative in the preschool setting, because you may have to say things that they haven't heard yet, or that, don't generally are not things that they generally want to hear. And that kind of leads into problem three, which is that you may be their first experience in school and their first experience having anyone else care for their child. And so, because of that, there's a lot of emotionality from parent side anyway. And you may be the first environment where you are able to see maybe their child interacting in a group setting or interacting with other kids, and they haven't maybe even had the opportunity to see that. So, all around, there's a lot of emotion involved with communicating in the preschool setting. There's a lot of kind of pitfalls that can happen when communicating with parents. But I think that, that's one of your really important roles because, again, you may be their first teacher. You're their first kind of entrance into the world of education where they'll be spending the next, 15 years or so of their lives. And so the way that the patterns and the behaviors that are set up from the beginning are going to be, really important as kids move through school and parents move their communication through school. Some of the things that you can really do when you're trying to look at the communication piece and maybe even improve the way that you feel that your communication goes. The first step is really to understand your own communication style. So, that a lot of us don't really take a lot of time to think about how we communicate and what that looks like and what feels good to us and what doesn't feel good to us. But the more that we understand that, the more successful we'll be communicating with parents and really anyone in general. And so, for example, if you examine your communication a little bit and you realize that you tend to not say anything that might upset somebody else, but then you end up, kind of having a day where it all spills out because you've been holding it in too long. Well, that's good to know. So then you can kind of be aware of how that might look to a parent. You like for example, my husband will always tell me that when I'm talking to him about something, a lot of times I start kind of in the mid in the mid process because I've already been thinking about it in my head for days or weeks. And now I start talking and I kind of expect everybody to be where I am. So that's something that I need to know because when I'm communicating, especially with parents, just because I know where you know, where I feel like I want to start the conversation, that doesn't mean that the parents are where I am yet. So I need to understand my own communication style so that I can be more successful with parents when I communicate. The other solution, which seems really obvious, but and again, none of these are, all of these are fairly obvious probably, but sometimes we just don't put them into play when we're doing, that communication piece. Um, the next one is to really know your stuff. And what I mean by that is that if you are talking about having concerns about a child, say, and that's the communication that you're getting involved in, it's really important for you to know kind of where, what are the areas of concern specifically with the child, and then kind of what are the expected um, in those particular areas, what is expected of a student, kind of the whole range in that area. So if you are sharing concerns about a student's play or their social interaction, then if you are able to share that in a way that says, this is typically what students would be doing at this level, this is what I'm seeing from your child, these are the areas that I feel like might be an area of concern. And these are kinds of the things that we've been doing to work on that. And so coming at it really from a confident expert place, because you are the experts. You are early childhood educators, so you are the experts in this area. So really being able to present that in a way that helps parents understand kind of the concreteness of it, the facts of it, so that they understand that you know what you're talking about and that you have a plan in place. And then the other piece is just really take a breath. A lot of times when we are about to engage or are engaged in a conversation that might be difficult, we come at it from a reactive place. So this is, we want to say something right away, we want to get our point across, we want to make sure that we're heard. But sometimes the best thing to do is to just take a breath and to think about it, to talk to other people, and get yourself in a place of calm so that you can come at it again from a place of professionalism and as an expert, and also with empathy, always with empathy, of course, because we understand that these are their children, and so sometimes we have to say things that they might not love to hear, but still are important for us to say. All right. So I wanted to kind of go through with you a process of that I have used to navigate difficult parent communication. I've spent a lot of years of my professional life involved in meetings and other situations where I've had to deal with parents that, for one reason or another, were either unhappy or difficult in some way. And so I've just really, I wanted to go through some of the things that I've found successful so that when you are in that situation, you don't feel like you don't have kind of the tricks and tools that you need to be successful. So, step one, take a minute to evaluate and change your mindset or state of mind. And so, what I mean by this, before entering into a difficult conversation, whether planned or unexpected, take a beat, slow down, identify your thoughts and feelings, and think about how those will impact your communication. This, for me, is really the number one key area that has led to success for me, because I tend to react. And so if a parent comes to me and maybe they're accusatory or they have a bunch of questions, I want to answer them. I want to solve it. I want to take care of it. But what I've found is that the best thing that I can do is to really make sure I'm in the right time frame. Am I running out the door? Am I frustrated from a really long day? It's always okay for you to say, like, okay, thank you for sharing that concern. I need to, gather some information and I'll get back to you. Just making sure that you're clear um, on how you're feeling and where you are in being ready to have that conversation. Don't ever feel like you are pushed into having a conversation at that moment. It's always okay for you to say, you know what, I'm going to take a minute, or I'm going to get back to you tomorrow. I'm running out the door. Whatever it is, it's totally okay. And then you have some time to really, change your mindset, evaluate where you are with things, and be ready to have that more difficult conversation. Always take time to make sure you're in that place. And like I said, breathe. And I know this sounds silly, but it's really, really important. Ahead of a difficult conversation with a parent, take some deep breaths. If it's a conversation you're particularly nervous about having, this will give you time and space to cool down your heart rate, to center your thoughts, and get your emotions under control. Because when we get escalated or nervous or anxious, then we don't always communicate in the way that we want to communicate. So the more that you can breathe, take your time, get yourself ready, the better off you are. Step number 3, make a loose agenda. And this is also really important for me because when emotions are heightened and we're having a tough conversation, we can forget some of our main points. If you're having a planned conversation, make a list of your main talking points. If you become flustered or overwhelmed, take a deep breath and refer to your agenda. This is a great way to make sure that you don't get off track, that you don't start getting taken down kind of the emotional road that maybe you're not comfortable in, but that you're really sticking to what needs to be said based on the student. An example of that is that sometimes I've had conversations with a parent where they begin maybe complaining about the other parent or another kid in the class or something like that. And it's very easy to go down that road. But I know that that in the end is not going to leave anybody feeling like they had a really positive communication experience. So I try and stay away from that as much as possible. And a loose agenda will keep that. It doesn't mean that we'll never, get off of that topic. It just means that it helps to keep on track. And this is really good also for teacher parent conferences because you have a certain amount of time and you need to stay within that time because you're scheduled. So you really want to keep, you want to keep clear on where you're going with the conversation. And it's just always a little bit more comforting when you have something to look at to keep you kind of on track. And then step number 4, listen actively and well. And again, this is something that took me quite a while to learn. Listening sounds easy enough, but it can actually be quite difficult, especially in a challenging conversation. We're all guilty, especially in a confrontational discussion, of waiting for the other person to stop speaking to interject our points. Let the other party make their point entirely. Take your beat and then use language that indicates you've been listening. And this is really, sometimes you'll have a parent kind of get really emotional or, be a little bit angry. And then you want to be able to say what's next. You want to be able to say your side or what information. And we end up not always being really active listeners. And I have found this to be incredibly helpful in dealing with talking with parents about difficult subjects, in that a lot of times if you're really listening, you can hear things that they're not exactly saying. So maybe they're using particular words, but that doesn't mean that's really what they mean. And so many times when we really listen, we can hear some things that tell us, oh, this is really what they're concerned about, or this is where they're stuck, or this is where I can help. um, and even when that's kind of couched in maybe an angry parent where they're saying a lot of things that like aren't true, and maybe they're saying you just don't like my kid, and you're not doing anything to help, and then you hear something like, and what happens if they aren't successful and can go to college or something, right? And so you hear that little bit because you've been listening, and you understand then that, oh, they're not really mad at me. They're actually scared about the future. And so I'm going to come back to that and be able to bring that in. Or, um, You have a parent saying things and then they say something like, oh, my kid's the bad kid. And then you hear that and oh, okay, this is what they think my information is telling them, but that's not at all what I meant. So I'm going to come back to that and I'm going to be able to clarify that for them so that they understand what I'm saying. So that listening is really important and oftentimes de escalates the situation when parents feel heard. Okay, step number 5, show empathy and compassion. This means that no matter what difficult conversation you're having, it's taking into account the other person's point of view. This might mean setting aside your own feelings or emotions in regard to this difficult conversation. And that's really, really important for us as teachers. And at the same time, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't tell parents the truth or even share difficult information. It means that we can say that with empathy and compassion and with an understanding that this might be hard for them to hear. So I just, I want us to remember that like we don't want to stay away from difficult conversations. That may hurt parents or may have information that they don't necessarily feel good about if it's important for them to hear for their child. So you know but that we can do that from a place of empathy and compassion and understanding that it's hard to hear and that you're there to support them and all of that. But that, it's important to share. And at the same time, it's important to be there to support them. Step number 6, take time to reflect. Whether you're giving or receiving bad news, it's important to take time to reflect, to offer questions or answers, and to give the other person space to do the same. By slowing the process down a bit, it allows both parties to communicate, to listen, and to gain perspective from the other. Take time towards the end of the conversation to reflect. If you find that you are overwhelmed with thoughts or emotions, offer to have a follow up meeting or email exchange where details can be ironed out. And I like to do this because I think that a lot of times um, it allows us to have the discussion of what I heard happen, and then they can share what they heard happen because sometimes it's not the same. And so I will say things a lot like, so what I heard you saying is, or so what I heard you're worried about, or it seems like your main, concern right now is this or that. And then to be able to say, okay, let me look into that a little bit more for you. Or absolutely, we can jump into looking at that. That's really helpful for us to know. And thank you for sharing. And you might say, I need a little bit of time to think about what we talked about and maybe come up with a plan, so let me get back to you. And then it's always really important that that follow up happens. If you say you're going to get back to a parent, that we do get back to a parent. Okay, and the last step, step number 7, is to offer solutions or helpful input. So, whenever you see the chance, offer a solution, recommendation, or alternative. Wherever you can, offer a solution. This allows you both to work together to find a solution or alternative that works for you, the student, and the parent. And I see this, I see you guys. This happens so much, and it's great. Is like, okay, so this isn't working. What can we do instead? Or I shared this information with you. These are some ideas I have. What ideas do you have? This is the place where we can really come together and share our thoughts and come up with solutions and helpful input. I think that, what's hardest for parents is when they hear a lot of like bad news or concerns with no recommendation for things that you as a teacher or a school can provide. Because then they just feel like they're on their own or there's nothing they can do or they feel pretty helpless with that. But, you know, for example, if you say, you have concerns about the social play of, the child, and you give examples and you give what you would expect to see, and then you can say, these are my ideas of how we can kind of work towards improving that in school. Do you have any other ideas? What are your thoughts? So that they feel like, you can handle it and that it's something that's something that you're able to do. So those are just some solutions for when you're really dealing with those more difficult situation. And then I just put together a bunch of parent teacher communication tips. And this is just in general, really all as much as you can, stick to some of these. And they're really helpful as you're moving forward, just to improve that communication. So you obviously want to aim for positive interactions. If you have a child where there's a lot of kind of feedback about things that aren't going great, you want to always make sure you're including a lot of positive along with that. Now make sure it's true. We don't want to just add a bunch of fluff. so that, parents feel better. We want to make sure that it's true. Be crystal clear with any information you share. Don't overshare. More words are not always better. Just be really concrete. That's what I was saying. Like, just be as specific as you can about what happened, what you need, anything like that. We don't need to talk some things through, for hours and hours. We just want to be able to share the information. Um, Using technology to help streamline communications is good. And what I mean by that is, if you have a message system that you can use, if you are using email, I personally always follow up all of my conversations with just a quick email, like, thanks so much for taking the time. And then if there were plans for what was going to happen after the talk, then I would include that. Just as a reminder, you were going to do this, I was going to do this. Let's, touch base in a couple weeks and see how that's working. And along with that, remember that anything in writing exists forever, so be thoughtful in what you write. We want to be really careful about that. If you're sending emails and or texts, that those last forever. And so you don't want to have something out there that you are not comfortable being out there. Document all parent communication and then include the date, time, and what was discussed. And I don't mean this for like if you're just chatting with parents at the end of the day at pickup, but if there's an issue or something's coming up, you want to make sure that you document that because you want to be able to say, yeah, we have been talking about this, or, we talked on this time and we talked on this time. And so that you just have that information. Remember to call and write home with good news as often as possible. And this is especially true for those kids who have more challenging behavior because the parents get used to hearing, kind of not the not good stuff. And so the more you can share the positive stuff, the better. Be prepared before you communicate with parents. So, make sure you know what you want to say if you're going to talk with them. Make sure that you have your clear information. And, thinking about any information that may come up that you're able to answer that. Be warm, obviously. We don't want to, we want them to feel like they are a part of the family. And along with that, that we make parents feel valuable and we foster a sense of trust. That they trust that if we say something, that we're not saying it to be mean, but that it's a concern or something that we're offering to help because we care about the children. Always ask questions and listen. This is really important. How, if we see something at school, we want to find out from the parents what's going on at home. Is there anything you should know? And then keep track of that. Don't make assumptions. And I think as educators, we do a lot of this where we find out something about a child and we're like, oh, well, that's why they're doing this, or oh, that's why they're doing this. But always best to ask parents about it, to talk about it, to really be clear about what's going on because maybe that's it, but maybe it's not. So we want to be careful about that. Find out what form of communication works best for parents. So this means, some parents like to have a parent communication log. Some parents don't like to have it. Some parents like emails. Some parents like a phone call. Some parents like for you to talk to them at pick up and drop off. Some parents don't. So really find out what works for them because then you're going to get the most response and receptiveness from them if it's a way that works for them. Some parents can't pick up because they're working. And so what works for them so that they can still feel involved or up to date and all of that information. And be willing to be flexible, but at the same time, set clear limits from the start. So what does that mean? If a parent says, the only time I can talk is 5 o'clock, because that's when I'm done or whatever. That's a clear limit that you might say, we don't, it's not during my work day. I'm not able to do that, but I would be able to do this or do that. So finding a way that works, but then once you've set your limit, that you want to be really clear about that. And so, um, I know that it's different. I know that at preschool, often there is some texting and texting pictures and things like that, but be really careful about that so that, once, somebody has your phone number, then they have it. And you want to set really clear limits about that, that this is the time that I will respond to any kind of, communication. And after that, I won't. And then I'll get to it the next day. And then ask for feedback from parents. This is all, sometimes we're scared to do this because like we don't necessarily want to hear what we have, maybe what people have to say, but it's really good to find out from parents, like, how did you experience that? Did that work for you? What can I do to make our, communication relationship better so that it works for you too? Tough conversations are better done in person, but keep in mind that all families look different and be respectful of that. So, you might want to meet with a family, but they might want to do it over the phone because they want both parents to be there and only one can be there, or depending on what kind of works for them. Be flexible with that. And be very, very careful about sharing your personal information. And I said this. I know that, we get very close with our families. And so it feels like it's okay to share our personal information. But in the end, you want to be protective of that. You want to be protective of, kind of what is yours, and keep that separate from your job and from school. I say this in most cases, texting is not professional, but I know that that's not always the case when your system is to send pictures and things like that. But I would say if there's any sort of serious communication, you would want that through either a phone or an email. It's never okay for parents to be aggressive or threatening. If you ever feel that that's the case, then you always should talk to your supervisor about that. Even if a parent is afraid or, angry about something, that doesn't give them the right to treat you in a way that's not kind. Reach out for support when you need, always. That's what everybody's around for. Practicing and writing drafts is a great idea. If it's a really, really tough situation or a tough conversation, it's totally okay for you to practice it. Write it down and just go through it a little bit if that helps you be comfortable. And then just always remember that you're the professional and you want to present that way. And so, thinking about when you're presenting, is it reflecting who you want to be as a professional? And that will help with your parent teacher communication. All right. I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for being here. And you can reach out if you ever have any questions. Thanks so much. Bye bye.